But I do want to introduce our speaker this evening, Mr. Andy Weir, who's the Executive Director for SAWDF, which is the Simsboro Aquifer Water District, and you can ask him more about that. But he serves as the Executive Director for the SAWDF, a Central Texas nonprofit working with landowners, businesses, and government to protect access to groundwater and the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer. I didn't even know that there was that aquifer, so I'm learning all kinds of things. He became involved in groundwater issues after completing a domestic well on his own property here in Bastrop County. 6 months later, a $1 billion utility purchased the water rights to 5,000 acres across the road from him and applied for permits to sink 8 commercial wells into the shared aquifer, potentially drying up his own well. He's retired from the state service, and he has immersed himself in groundwater issues and stays busy participating in board meetings of area groundwater conservation districts, regional planning groups that develops the state water plan, the Texas Water Association, and he also testifies at the Texas legislature, which will be interesting since we're about to go into Sindai. Oh, we did, June 2nd, right? Yes, okay. Andy and SAWDF encourage you and all landowners here in Bastrop County to participate in the decision-making process that determines your access to groundwater. And I'd like to welcome up Mr. Andy Weir.
What's the best spot? Right here?
Okay, whenever you like.
You'll be able to hear me. So you have, I'm not speaking loud enough, just yell out. You got to be louder.
Uta will definitely do that for you.
Okay.
She's great.
And I'm in the same boat. I got all spiffied up, and then I didn't put my hearing aids in before I came over here. So if I don't hear your question, someone in the back repeat it loudly for me. Thank you. So the SAWDF is our name, and for the acronym. One of the legislators, when we were testifying, I said, SAWDF is ready to help you whenever you want to come and talk to our citizens. And he said, thanks. Anybody have questions for Sawdust as an organization? Because he was a little bit against us at that time in the legislature. The legislature has changed dramatically in their support of landowners and access to groundwater. So I'm curious to know who's here tonight, wanting to know if there's anybody here that has a domestic or livestock well on their property. Okay, we got 3. All right. And then who else is on rural water, like Aqua water supply? Okay, most of y'all. And then in the city water, any on Bastrop, city of Bastrop water? Okay, yeah. How does that, the quality of water for your rural aqua water, you ever have to take your clothes in and get them reimbursed for, when they turn orange?
Yeah.
Occasionally. And the same thing in the past has happened in Bastrop.
And then the sulfur smell.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
That concerns me.
I didn't realize that. Anybody have irrigation well on their property? Okay. Oh, wrong button. And who remembers the drought of 50, 57? Okay. 2 people remember. And then what about 2010 to 2015?
Oh,
yeah. That was a big one here in town. And so the question is, from your perspective, which one is worse? For me, it was 2010 to 2015. And the statistics put them about equal as to what they call the drought of record. And that's what the state plans for. The state does all their water planning based on drought and how to survive the next drought that's going to come down the road. The prediction is there's going to be more droughts more often, and not necessarily deeper in intensity, but they're just going to come more often. So we had, between 50 and 2010, there we've got 60 years Now we're looking at maybe, them happening every 20 years type of thing. So the state's trying to plan their water supply around drought. There's Bastrop County and the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer. So this is like taking a slice of cake across this part of the county. And we got the river running through here. I don't have a good representation of the cities, but the aquifer is a sand-based aquifer. We always hear about the Edwards up in the hill country, Save Our Springs, and all the things that happen in San Marcos, and all that Wimberley and Dripping Springs, Johnson City, all that beautiful territory out there. Those waters are what is called a rock or a karst aquifer. And that rock is all holed out. You've seen those rocks over there in the hill country look like Swiss cheese. That's how the water is stored in those aquifers. But for us, it's just sand. It's just layers of sand that are saturated with water. And if you put a straw in there and you suck hard enough, the water comes out readily out of that sand structure.
And those are natural aquifers?
These are all occurred because sediments, as the ocean receded, remember how Texas was underwater, as the ocean receded, these are the layers of beach that were laid down over millions and millions of years. And so at the bottom, then down below we've got some really hard rock. But at the bottom we have this sort of muddy formation with some shale, and it's called the Hooper. It doesn't give up the water as rapidly because it's more muddy, thicker.
Is that the one that has the high iron content?
No, not the Hooper. The Calvert Bluff is the one with the iron. So the Hooper, the Simsboro is the primo water in the state. This is water that you drink out of the ground without any kind of filtration, no smells, low iron content, low magnesium content, low dissolved solids, not very saline. It's beautiful water, and it's prized by everybody in the state and made us a target, and I'll show you that a little bit later.
How far down is it?
That depends. So if you're over in the western part of Bastrop, over here, it's at the surface.
Oh.
So that's what outcrop, that's where it gets recharged, and then it goes 100 feet deep for every mile it goes.
It must be past my place because.
And so when you get down to where I'm at, I'm over here in Circle D near the fire station. It's 700 feet below the surface. And then by the time it gets to Smithville, it's almost 2,000 feet below the surface. And so no one's harvesting the water there at Smithville. So you access the water where you're able. So domestic and livestock wells, it costs a pretty penny to go that deep, and most people don't do it. They stay in other layers. Cities with big production wells can afford to drill that deep and produce lots of water. So the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer, these layers, the Calvert Bluff is, you all seen that red clay that we have? The Calvert Bluff is 800 feet of that red clay. And that's where a lot of people, now in there's little what they call lenses of sand. So you'll have this little strata and all of a sudden there'll be 50 feet thick thing of sand, and it might run for a mile and then it pinches out and it disappears. So this guy drills, he has water. This guy says, great, I'll do the same thing. He drills, he's never gonna hit sand because it's unpredictable. And so a lot of people drill. Some people are lucky. I have a neighbor, he's got a Calvert Bluff well, 40 gallons a minute. Next neighbor over drilled a Calvert Bluff well, 8 gallons a minute. And it's all red, looks like orange crust soda coming up out of the ground. The other guy's got clean water because he's in one of those sand lenses. So the Calvert Bluff is really thick, and it keeps the Simsboro confined. This is slate, this is clay. The Simsboro is pure white sand, and everyone wants to get the clean water out of there. And the Carrizo is similar. The Carrizo's at the top, it's a little shallower, starts right here in town, and then goes, by the time you get to Smithville, it's 1,000 feet below the surface. So Smithville water supply is in the Carrizo. Other people, like the city of Bastrop, is about to go to Simsboro water. They're gonna put wells in the Simsboro. They're gonna give up those pumps they have on the river downtown. Those are sucking out river water that's just been filtered through the bank. And so they're switching to better water in the Simsboro.
What's gonna happen
Everybody's switching to
those-
that.
What's happening to those that they're abandoning?
Those wells, they're gonna keep one to water the parks, because then they're not using it for, because you have to,
You don't need to
you have to
filter it,
treat,
the water.
yeah, you have to, the water treatment for river water is 5 times as expensive as groundwater, especially the Simsboro.
Yeah.
And so that's cheaper for them and more dependable. The river layers go up and down, and then you have to highly treat it. They can use that to irrigate the parks. So they'll keep one well, they're gonna turn one over to the groundwater district for monitoring, but the others they'll discontinue, because they're real expensive to keep up too.
Are they?
The steel is deteriorating, and so they made a good choice. Carrizo is a very popular formation also. As you get below Bastrop, you get into Caldwell, Gonzales, Guadalupe counties. There's only Carrizo down there. There's none of these other layers. They all pinch out into just clay, like the Calvert Bluff. And so everyone is based on the Carrizo. So San Antonio, New Braunfels, San Marcos, Kyle, Buda, they're all sucking Carrizo water out of Gonzales County and shipping it to the I-35 corridor. Groundwater makes up 60% of the water we use in the state.
Andy, I was wondering about, I live in Lake Bastrop Acres over here.
Yes.
Somewhat close to where you live there. Anyway, off on the south side of Pershing Boulevard, there's these aqua water wells.
Yes.
Are they tapped in Carrizo or where?
They're in the Simsboro.
Simsboro.
Yes, sir. The shallower Simsboro, so they're a little bit up closer toward the outcrop.
Okay.
Yes.
So where did that Simsboro start? Up to the west?
This picture?
Well.
Oh, the
where-
Simsboro
yeah.
outcrop, yes, ma'am, runs from here to here.
Is
But-
it
but
east of
where is it? Is it like at the
1704?
Hyatt or some, can you tell us where, at the Hyatt or further up?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right by where we are.
Let me switch pictures here. So I zoom in. Oh yeah, I was describing Calvert Bluff. Here's a better picture. So that Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer, all those formations cuts through, and it starts way over in Louisiana, in Bastrop, Louisiana. If y'all have been, that's north of Monroe. In Bastrop, Louisiana, the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer starts over there and runs all the way to Laredo, to Mexico, and then into Mexico. So this thing, and so this is, the water flows this way towards the coast. So as the oceans receded, it laid down these layers of sand. And the water that's in that aquifer naturally flows towards the coast. So it rains here, it percolates in, and then it just, gravity takes it all the way down to the Gulf. Miles and miles deep underground. These are all the people that are sucking that water and shipping it out of our area. They're
Why
not
is that?
concerned with us.
And why is that?
And there's all the amounts that they're
Hello?
shipping. Yes, ma'am?
And why do
Why
we
is
allow that?
Well, because state law says you own the water beneath your land. And these companies, all of these companies lease all the acreage. They bought the groundwater rights or they lease the groundwater rights. So they lease the acreage for 50,000 acres, surface acres. They're allowed to pump 50,000 acres of water and ship it wherever they want. That's Texas law. And we'll get into how we're changing that little by little. Yes, sir.
Question, you mentioned that Bastrop gone away from river water to do that. At what point, like the price of water would permeation type systems probably be feasible?
Permeation, you said permeation.
Filter it.
Oh,
Through
right.
high pressure filters, I mean, that's what.
Right,
we're doing with
you
saltwater.
could put it through reverse osmosis
Yes.
or, or desalinization if you
Yeah.
go.
Permeators for the pipes, yeah.
So the cost, it depends on what fresh water costs you currently. And once that becomes so expensive, then they switch to a new system. And so that's happening in some places. And when you look at water plans for the city of Austin, water plans for the Lower Colorado River Authority themselves, the reservoir is a fixed amount of water that they can ever hope to sustain. They're looking at doing desalination to add water to their supply. But they won't do it for 20 years because the cost benefit is not there. It'll be worth it. People will be paying that amount of money for water 20 years from now, so then they can build a desalination plant. So everybody, these are all Simsboro wells, and they're shipping all of this water. So Lake Bastrop is 15,000 acre feet of water. That's the terms we talk about. An acre, 1 foot deep in water, that's an acre foot. Lake Bastrop contains 15,000 acre feet of water, and they keep it level over there. They use groundwater to do it. There's 5 Simsboro wells at the power plant, and they pump the water into the lake and keep it at a constant level. That's how that's kept, and that most of that evaporates, and then some of it's used in the power plant. So they own all of that territory, Lower Colorado River Authority. They have all that acreage. They were allowed to get that permit. And they're the $1 billion utility that bought the Griffith League Ranch. For those of you who live in Circle D, the Griffith League Ranch properties, 5,400 acres. They bought the water rights from the Boy Scouts. So the Boy Scouts still own the land, but the Lower Colorado River Authority owns all the water under that land. So that's how that
they make
works.
that deal?
Well, here's how that works. The former general manager of the Lower Colorado River Authority retired, moved to Bastrop, Joe Beal, served on various commissions, got on the board for the Boy Scout camp, or for the Capital Area Boy Scouts, and 1 year later they sold their water rights to the Lower Colorado River Authority.
Money went into his pocket.
Yeah.
He just loves water, and he loves the Lower Colorado River Authority. I don't think of it as being nefarious, but there was a definite connection there, that he was constantly thinking about his old organization and getting them access to water.
Well, thank you.
But this amount of water, so they asked for 25, but they only got 8 because we fought them in court. And it goes to the Supreme Court next month, Texas Supreme Court. They've been fighting the decision by the groundwater district was to give them 1/3 of their request. And they've had it in court, district, appeals court, now we're going to state Supreme Court next month to see, and they've lost in all those court cases. So we're hoping that the Supreme Court sticks with it. And then landowners will have fought for our right to access the groundwater. So the deal being, we didn't say no to the permit, we said just that's too much. Because by the time you suck out that amount of water, my well will be dry. So if you take less, I'll have some, and we'll call it even. And they refused to enter mediation on that, they refused to enter negotiations, they refused the permit by the groundwater district, which established that as fair, and now that's taking it through the court, spending millions of dollars to get that water. So if you want to know why your water bill is so expensive, a lot of times it's because companies are spending millions and millions in legal fees to get their water supply. All right.
Can I stop you for a second? You said a minute ago that this was Simsboro.
Yes.
All these wells were Simsboro. But I know that Vista Ridge, for instance, up there in Burleson County, some of those wells are in Simsboro, but some of them are in the Carrizo.
In Carrizo, correct. And what I don't show you is there's a big project right here, right just 3 miles south of the Bastrop border. There's a project called the Alliance Regional Water Authority, and they're taking 30,000 acre feet of water, and the pipeline goes to San Marcos, and it goes to Kyle and to Buda. And they're getting their water not from the Edwards Aquifer, because that's in limited supply. It's suffering from all the development. So they've decided to come over here 45 miles away to build a pipeline to take groundwater from Gonzales County. And last week, we won another battle. They And it's another river authority. Guadalupe Blanco River Authority is a partner in this project. And they asked to increase their development of groundwater by 9,000 acre feet. They wanted to drill 3 new wells and add more to that permit. And the groundwater district denied that permit last week. 120 citizens showed up at the board meeting. 50 people spoke, including the county judge and all the county commissioners who met in quorum at that meeting so they could all be present. They called a county meeting and they all testified against it. And the groundwater district down there, those members are elected, and everyone told them, we elected you to do right by us. This is what we want. And they denied the permit. That's the first time that's ever happened.
This is Gonzales County?
Gonzales County
Is it true that
Underground
they
Water
carried a
District.
flag that had a well on it and they said, come and take it?
It would have been nice. It was something like that, because there were people that were, been there, their family's been there since that time of the Texas Revolution. They had land grants, and they all spoke, in turn. And there was, what beautiful was, there was 2 young people who had interned with Senator Colcourse, because that's her territory, and so they learned about the need for this, so they also testified at the public hearing and talked about what they had learned being in the senator's office this last session. So it was very inspiring that everyone came.
Have they started doing the eminent domain to get through Caldwell County to get the pipeline?
The pipeline's done.
Oh, really?
San Marcos has already taken water. They're going to finish the connection to Kyle. Actually, they started pumping water to Kyle. They're going to finish the connection to Buda, wherever it's at. That's the last piece of the puzzle that's already financed, easements, everything's ready to go. Yeah, so that's a done deal.
Have you heard any stories about what happened to the landowners in terms of how the pipeline going across their property went?
I have not.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, for us in Bastrop, it's going to be, there's a company called Recharge Water.
We have another question.
Oh,
Linda.
sorry, Linda.
You said it's a done deal, but what did I miss? The groundwater district said no.
For the expansion, for the increase in the permit. The other permit is a done deal and they're already pumping it. They just can't increase the amount of water. So for us, there's a company called Recharge. They have 7 wells in Lee County and 7 wells in Bastrop. They haven't dug these here. The permit requires them to do 4 wells in Lee County before they can drill in Bastrop. They sold this water to Hutto and to the Manville Company, which sells water to Pflugerville and Round Rock. They're going to sell the remainder, 30,000 acre feet. They're in negotiations right now to sell that water to Georgetown. They're just deciding on the price and how much they're going to take every year. So over the next 20 years, they'll up the amount of water. So 30,000 acre feet from right here, 8,000 from the Lower Colorado River Authority, and their plan is to pipe it to eastern Travis County, to the 130 corridor. That's where they say the water's needed. So it's not for Bastrop. They're going to send it out of the county.
Are all of those wells in Simsboro?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, all just Simsboro wells. And so the reason this is a big deal to us, this is the impact. This is what it's called drawdown. So when they start sucking that water, when you punch a hole in the aquifer, the water comes up in your straw, comes up in your wellhead because it's under pressure, right? Because there's a water level 8 miles away that's 100 feet below the surface, and so when you punch a hole in here, the water comes up to almost to the same level in your area. But when they start sucking, Vista Ridge, Sandow Lakes Ranch, sending water to Samsung Factory, Recharge, the water level is going to drop 450, 500 feet where they're sucking the water. And so my well's 700 feet deep. If LCRA and Recharge come online, I'm right here next to the tube. When that happens, I'll lose 200 feet of water out of my well. It's going to cost $15,000 to put my pump, a new pump, because it has to be 5 times as powerful to push the water all the way up. So it has to go down to my well. So I'll have access to water at their 8,000 acre feet. I won't at the 25,000 acre feet. I'd have to put my pump at 700, and there's no guarantee that I'd have water. So the well, what is that? Almost 10 years ago cost me $25,000. To do that same well today would cost $60,000. So this makes a difference. So Vista Ridge dropped the water level 500 feet. All of these wells up in here, these green wells, they all went dry 6 months after this project came online.
So all those green spots went dry?
Just in this area right here, and these other wells over here. In the city of Caldwell over in Burleson County, they had to drop their municipal well pumps because it took the water level down over 50 feet. So it cost millions of dollars, and then ranchers that woke up with no water for them or their cattle, they had to haul water, things like that. So we fought this in the legislature. We've got 2 bills passed. One is that whenever you grant a permit, you have to consider the impact to all the domestic and livestock wells. We've been fighting for 8 years to pass that bill. It passed this session. And we're hoping that the governor either signs it or lets it become law by this Friday, because that's the deadline for him to act on it.
Tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. Tomorrow, yeah, 20th.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, so, yes, ma'am.
You said some of the water is supposed to be piped up to Georgetown?
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't Georgetown practically on top of an aquifer itself? Another aquifer?
Well,
I think they already have water up there.
they are on top of the Northern Trinity Aquifer, and that aquifer has been sucked dry 20 years ago. Because there were no, before groundwater conservation districts were created to referee the access to groundwater, and they still have no groundwater conservation district in Georgetown or Williamson County, and because of that, it's the Wild West. And there was a story just last year where a farmer dug a 900-foot well and he didn't get a drop of water because that part of the Trinity Aquifer has been sucked dry.
I think they've been, for the last 10, maybe 15 years, they've been shipping water up to Belton and Temple themselves. They've been, so I can see that it would go dry. Besides taking care of their own.
So those are the negative impacts that we're trying to avoid with groundwater districts and with keeping people informed so that you fight for your groundwater rights and your access to groundwater. All right, legislature, real quick. This was a big water session, so everybody came out saying, you know, we're going to do something about water. They recommended dedicated funding, so that was the rumors, and they came through on that. Someone showed me the picture, right? They just signed that bill, Senate Bill 7 today. In the Senate, these were the players, Senator Charles Perry from up in the Panhandle. So the last, when all those wells went dry in Lee County, Vista Ridge came online in 2020. 6 months later, 200 wells went dry. In the 2021 legislative session, we showed up and we demanded to be heard. And we came in, we actually SAWDF, we got a tour bus, we brought 45 people from Lee County, and we came in to testify. And I asked Chairman Perry, do you want everyone to speak 3 minutes each, or would you rather have a panel and we'll limit it to 10 minutes? And he said, give me the panel, please. But everybody sat in the audience with a button that said, protect my groundwater rights. And we talked about how the impact of these groundwater permits that export the water from the county, so it takes all of that economic potential for Lee County has now been exported someplace else. And he understood that, and ever since that testimony, he has been protecting groundwater rights. And this latest bill that was signed today, Senate Bill 7, I'll talk about this. So here's where all those people come from. They're very rural people, so they understand what we're talking about. And then in the House, we had a lot. They had, 13 members on that committee. And they're also from very rural areas. Where it's close to a big city, there's a carve out. So it's not urban people that are all, and the chairman, Cody Harris here, he's in a battle for his life right now. Because there's a brand new export permit that just showed up in his county, Anderson County, last week for 33,000 acre feet to ship it to Dallas-Fort Worth area. And he is just livid. And he called a special meeting of the House Natural Resources Committee today. They're going to meet, I think, later a few weeks from now to talk about this, how they can stop this. So they signed Senate Bill 7 today, and that's 50% of the money, the $1 billion a year. So $500 million is going to go to new water, and that's desalination, aquifer storage and recovery, brackish groundwater, the stuff that's so salty that you can't drink it, so you have to filter it. But it's half as salty as the ocean, so it's cheaper to desalinate that. And then the other, all the water development programs, if you saw today's news story, there's one from KXAN in Austin. The city of Austin lost 9-something billion gallons of water just in a black hole, somewhere in broken pipes underground that they have no idea where they are. And it's going to happen every year until they find the, you know, the source of the problem. And that was the same way in the big cities in Texas. I'll talk about that too. So this is the new water, this is the bill signing today.
You buried the headline for us.
Oh.
That bottom line.
The bottom line.
No funds, yes, I'm sorry. And so Senator Perry made sure that that got into this bill, and it's also going to be part of the constitutional amendment that you vote on in November. So this money depends on you approving $1 billion a year for the next 20 years. Then they'll decide if they'll keep doing it again. We need $100 billion to fix all the water problems in the state. This is a down payment on that. But and I'm talking about 50 years out.
You mean 100 billion?
We need 100 billion
Okay.
over the next 50 years, and they're doing 20 billion over the next 20. So, you know, they'll have to decide. We're kicking it down the road to the next generation to decide what they're going to do.
Well, is this taking
But
into
I
account
just wanna
the
stop.
influx of population into Texas?
Huh?
I want to stop and say, this, in my opinion, was a tremendous victory for this area, because at least we're not going to have our taxes being used to drain our aquifers. We made sure that the new taxes are going to really get the stuff that you were talking about, the desal and other, and they're not going to be able to use it to drain our aquifers around here. And that is just incredible news.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a big deal, and we have these guys to thank. So this is Chairman Perry. The speaker is not there, Burrows. This is Chairman Cody Harris of the House Natural Resources Committee. And so this is interesting. Most of the people in this picture, different organizations, Environmental Defense Fund, the water infrastructure, the guys that build all the water treatment plants, and this legislative Texas Water Association. So our little group, as an advocate, we joined Texas Water Association. So we're in there with the $1 billion utility, LCRA, Guadalupe Blanco River Authority, Trinity River Authority. They're all $1 billion utilities. City of Dallas Water, Austin Water is there, San Antonio Water. And we'll have breakfast together, and then we'll go and do legislative strategy. And so that committee brings all the bills to the legislature. And they have to have a 90% consensus before they'll bring a bill to a legislator. And we get to participate then in that. So we're getting other groups in there that are defending private property rights in groundwater, so that we have a voice, so that the bills that get that 90% consensus include our voice. And if they don't get our voice, they don't get passed on, because they lack the support that's needed. So you can participate, is what I'm trying to get at. You can make a difference by joining your organization, organizations joining other associations that draft these bills, and you can make a difference. this is a follow-up on what you said, that he created that new water fund because he doesn't want to keep taking fresh groundwater, and that's why that was in there. So this is, I had to highlight this because this is going to be a new issue for Bastrop. Okay, so these are the things that are funded by that 500 million, sorry. And it's not, when they say infrastructure to deliver new water, it can't be taking water from this Simsboro and shipping it to San Antonio. It has to be brackish groundwater that they're moving, or desalinated water from Corpus Christi and shipping that up someplace inland. But ASR is where people want to store their water in an aquifer because it never evaporates. And it's there ready for you when you need it. San Antonio does this. They have 110,000 acre feet stored underground in the Carrizo. And when they're like this last drought, this last summer, everybody around San Antonio was in stage 4 water restrictions because they were using the Edwards Aquifer. And San Antonio was at stage 2 because they could draw 30,000 acre feet out of the ground where they had temporarily stored it to make up the difference. And they didn't have to cut back on all the watering, people washing their cars and all that stuff, because they had stored this water underground. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that works and why it works for San Antonio, and it's probably not going to work in Bastrop. Again, Senator Perry saying when you move water, you move people's livelihoods. He's just a really good supporter. So these are the bills that passed. I forgot to say on this one. This one was signed by the governor. So they had a deal up in Georgetown where you had an HOA telling people you have to water your lawn. There's a drought, and they would fine you if your grass turned brown. You had to go water your lawn. So they got this bill. There was 5 bills on this topic filed. This is the one that passed and was signed by the governor. Gerdes had a bill for Bastrop to prevent Austin Water from doing an aquifer storage and recovery project out here. It failed by 2 votes in the Senate. And I'll go into details.
And say why.
This one is House Bill 29. We filed a bill, one of those ranchers whose well went dry in Lee County. I sat down for breakfast with her at the sale barn, and we were looking at the newspaper, and there was an article about City of San Antonio, who took all the water, lost 50,000 acre feet into the ground somewhere under San Antonio. They don't know where, and that's been going on for year after year for 10 years. And she started crying. It's like, my well went dry for nothing. And she begged me, do something about it. And so we sat down and we came up with legislation. We looked at bills and how they're written, and we just copied and pasted, and we got a bill good enough. We took it to Representative Gerdes, and he gave it to the Ledge Council, and their proofreaders made it pretty and legal. And we filed it last session, 2 sessions ago, and it got to a committee, and it got all the 8, and it picks on the top 8 cities. They have to start saving water and figuring out where the leaks are, because they're all ignoring it. And it got a hearing. All the cities turned out and said, oh, this is impossible and this is crazy, and it's not that big a deal. And then the chairman, Perry, picked up on it. And so this session, he said, yes, let's file the bill again, but let's improve it and add teeth to it. And so it had fines. If you don't save water, you're going to get fined $25,000. You have to have a plan to save water. And if you flip the bird at the legislature, we're going to fine you. And that bill passed and was signed by the governor immediately when it got on his desk.
Is some of the water that's coming from the constitutional amendment in SB 7, some of the money, that's the dedicated money, is it going to go to compensate cities for fixing some of these leaks?
Potentially.
What do they call that program? Do you remember the technical?
They would come under, I don't have it up here.
Okay.
It's not the SWIFT fund. But there is a possibility that they could ask for a grant to help them. So there's an article, if you all look at the Express News from last week, the city of San Antonio, to their credit, because they've been the culprit for drying up so many wells, they came up with a 10-year plan to curb their water loss, to go from 70 gallons per connection, so like 70 gallons per water meter is lost every day. They want to get that down to 40. And the state of Texas considers 30 gallon, I mentioned about considering exempt wells. We fought that for 8 years, that was passed. We're hoping that the governor lets it become law. There was a question.
So which are the top 8 cities?
So that's Dallas, Fort Worth, Amarillo, San Antonio, Austin, Houston. I'm missing somebody in there.
El Paso?
El Paso, yeah. Yeah, and that article, that KXAN story that you can look on their website today, it goes into the details for all the water loss for all the big cities. And it shows where they stand. Houston is also another one that's up around 100 gallons per connection per day.
Right, I want to come back to the injection well, the ASR. What does ASR stand for again?
Aquifer Storage and Recovery.
Okay, and so that bill failed to pass. And by the way, I watched the Senate debate where Eckhart was defending Austin and Schwartner representing us. We're having the debate back and forth about, Eckhart was opposed to the bill. And some of the arguments she was making were pretty good arguments. She was saying, guys, we have all this water that Austin uses from the lakes, and that water just evaporates when it's in the lakes. We want to take it and put it where it won't evaporate. It's an efficient use of water. What's the big deal? What are you guys worried about? Well, and Schwartner was going back and forth, and I wanted to have, all this bill was going to do was just delay it while they studied it. But now that we don't have that, what do you think is actually going to happen here in Bastrop with Austin coming in and injecting water into, what are they going to do at the Carrizo Wilcox, the Simsboro, what are they going to do?
Okay, so SAWDF is a part of those discussions. We meet every 2 weeks. Because of Gerda's bill, it brought the mayor of Austin, former Senator Kirk Watson, to the table. He met, he said, first of all, Austin, as long as I'm mayor, Austin will not use eminent domain to achieve this project. So that's a big plus. So 2 things to Austin's credit. Their water plan says they will never sink wells out here to ship water back to Austin.
Well, why would Austin have the rights to eminent domain here?
Because if it's a municipal water supply, you have eminent domain anywhere in the state.
Really?
Wow.
You have eminent domain anywhere in the state, outside your county, and so you can achieve all the right-of-ways to put a pipeline straight from point A to B if necessary. So he took that off the table. So that's one plus. They've said they're not going to pump groundwater. They want to store the groundwater. And so they come to the table with us. We have the Groundwater District, City of Smithville, City of Bastrop, County Commissioners, Groundwater District, the Landowners Group, SAWDF, Cola Vista, WCD number 2, and City of Elgin, and Lee County Water Supply has some wells in Page.
What about Aqua?
And Aqua, I'm sorry, yeah. So we're all at the table, and all the geologists, hydrogeologists have come up with a technical working group, and they're looking at the chemistry. So the big worry is this: Austin uses surface water, and that's water from Lake Travis and Lake Austin. That water is chemically very different than the water that's in the aquifer. And when you inject it, it has a different oxygen content, and it can make arsenic become soluble. Right now, there's arsenic down there, but it's bound to rocks, and you never get it in your well, and you never get it in your water supply. But if you inject a different type of water down there, you may get it. So they're willing to do the chemistry on that. There's also forever chemicals in some of the lake water. So that's the fire foam retardant, the water resistant coating they put on pants like this, on your rain slicker, that kind of stuff. Those chemicals never break down and they've become a health hazard and they're rated by the EPA. They showed up even in the tap water in Austin. So even though they filtered their water and it meets EPA standards, there's still some chemicals in there. There's caffeine in there. There's some hormones in there. There's some pharmaceuticals in there in the tap water after it's been through treatment. So our position is the aquifer is pristine. Those don't exist in our Carrizo aquifer. And so they're going to have to be sure that they remove that before they inject the water. And then they've got to figure out.
But how can they remove that if those are forever
They have to do,
chemicals?
so the normal treatment that they use, sediments and different aerations, capture most pathogens, etc. But if you do reverse osmosis, you can get all of those things out. But then that water itself from the reverse osmosis has to be remineralized. It has to be massaged so that it'll work in the ground. And so that adds cost to them. And this is our strategy for SAWDF. They also have the possibility of doing brackish groundwater desalination. So there's, in that same barren aquifer, the Northern Trinity, that's over in Manor, and then where it connects to Williamson County, there is some brackish groundwater down there that is available. It's not potable water, so that's why people don't have pumps down there. But you can get the brackish groundwater and desalinate it. They could do all of that in Travis County. They would never have to put a pipeline in and do a project in Bastrop. They did a cost breakdown. It's $2,000 per acre foot to do the ASR over here in Bastrop. It's $2,800 an acre foot to do the brackish groundwater. If we can push the cost of ASR up to $2,800, why deal with the headache? You know, the easements and all of that. They'll stay home in their own county and get their water there.
I'm a career military officer, trained in senior service schools for strategy and tactics. Wow, let's see. The Chinese are sending deadly fungus over to poison our food supply. They send viruses over, and now how can we possibly protect an injection of water from someplace else into our aquifer? That is strategically stupid because it really exposes it to a disaster. That's just my thinking.
Right. So those are the things that is what we sought in these negotiations is we have all the risk. And so we have to have ultimate veto on the project. And that's what we're asking for. And we have a document, a legal document that we're drafting that'll be done by August. That's the deadline. And then it has to go to the city councils and all the different boards to be approved. But we are ultimately seeking is a veto on whether they could put such water into the pristine aquifer.
It doesn't stop bad actors, though.
Okay. So,
Andy,
yes, ma'am.
have they said where they want to do this?
Yes, I'll show that. I'm going to show exactly where.
Okay.
So we're going to set up meetings with SAWDF with the landowners in the target area and let them understand what Austin Water wants to do under their land so they can speak out and be heard. So Austin Water has agreed to carry their comments to the city council and let the city council re-vote on this project based on output from Bastrop. So those are the things we've secured so far in the discussions, even though the bill failed. It would have been a lot easier to just make them go away. That didn't happen, so now we're negotiating. But it's 8-on-1, and we're getting our words heard. So to Austin's credit, they're willing to listen and put it into the document. So that was how you could participate. That was better. You all know how to do this. So here's the Austin Storage and Recovery. They want to do it 3 miles south of Page. And their territory could be anywhere from 3,500 to 7,000 acres. So they need to control that amount of surface acreage because they don't want anyone else putting a straw into the Carrizo and sucking out their stored water. And it's required by TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. They issue the permits for injection wells. And they say if you're going to create a storage area, you have to control the surface acreage so that no one contaminates your water, no one sucks it away, and all of that. Yes, Richard?
Is it coincidental that that's the Thomas turf grass that's right in the middle of the circle?
No, he's not there. This
No,
is
he's on the other side.
south of Page. Thomas is over
Yeah.
here.
He's right.
Okay.
Old
Yeah.
Potato Road.
Yeah, right
Yeah,
there.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. I was thinking that was 21 on the right.
And
Okay.
they got a new one north.
Right.
Is that 290 and 21?
That's right. So this is Page 290 going through here. So there's Page, the Page Community Center. You go down 2104. So it's somewhere in this area. That's all. We don't have the exact location. So our SAWDF, I'm going to pull the tax records and notify all of these property owners in this whole big area. And we're going to hold town hall meetings.
Is that
At the-
Bastrop and Lee County?
No.
No.
Well, this is Lee County right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what is this, Allen? Oh, this is
No,
Allen.
that's 290.
Yeah, north is straight up. Right, Highway 290 comes through there, and then Highway 21, this is South Old Potato Road,
Where is South Potato Road?
South Old Potato Road. That's Old Potato Road right here,
This is our land.
okay?
You'll be getting a letter.
We're gonna be getting a letter.
So, this is the biggest deal that we're, so, I love innovation, I love saving water. The project makes perfect sense because it keeps all that water that Austin needs from evaporating. But we've got to have the chemistry right. We don't want the risk of contaminating the aquifer. It works in San Antonio because they get an allotment of Edwards aquifer water and they store it in the Carrizo. So it's groundwater to groundwater.
Right.
The chemistry works. Surface water to groundwater is a whole different ballgame. And there's been some horror stories. There was one down in League City where they didn't work. And it created a arsenic bloom instead of a nice storage space. And so that had to be remediated. So one of the things we're also asking for is a remediation bond. In case anything goes wrong, then they're on the hook.
Sir, could you address the cost of desalinization and if there's any technological breakthrough or anything on the line to decrease the cost of that?
I don't have those details, Don. I have not seen any breakthroughs other than one MIT student's small-scale project, but nothing on an industrial level.
You know, Israel does that, but I know it's an expensive process because it's a reverse osmosis, which requires a lot of pumping energy,
Right.
a lot of energy to create the water. But
Southern
there's-
California does
But when
the
the
same
surface,
thing.
when the groundwater is all sucked into the municipalities, there's got to be an alternative somewhere.
Correct. And San Antonio has a desalinization plant. They do brackish groundwater desalinization in addition to their aquifer storage. So interesting for them, right? They have San Antonio, they have one big territory. They have their ASR storage, 110,000 acre feet in the Carrizo. And then below that, below the Carrizo, there's brackish groundwater, a mile deep. They bring that water to the surface, run it through reverse osmosis, and then they blend it with that other water in the stored Carrizo and send it back to the city.
To decrease the salinity?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they desal it first.
Completely?
And you can go visit that plant. It's worth visiting in San Antonio. It's called H2O Oaks plant. And you can see all of those processes working at one time. So it works groundwater to groundwater. We're questioning surface water to groundwater.
Aren't they doing desalinization also in Corpus?
Correct. That's the first big state desalinization plant. The deal with desalinization is what do you do with the concentrated brine once you've taken all the salt out? The controversy in Corpus Christi is they're not willing to send it 8 miles offshore. They're going to dump it in the bay. And the concern is the bay is going to become super salty, it's going to wipe out the oysters and everything else. And so somebody made that risk, you know, decided on that risk level and decided to take it.
Why don't they just sell it to Martin's?
Yeah. That would be something.
Well, Southern California does it as well. They do desalinization.
But
Do they
there's
ship it out
probably
8
a rate.
miles?
It probably, usually you get it out almost to international waters.
Right. Okay.
And then,
And why did
and
Corpus
so
not
there was
want to do that?
someone offered to use decommissioned oil pipes that were coming from offshore rigs that are already there, that aren't being used anymore. They could say, well, you could remount those unused oil well pipes and just use it to send the salt deep out into the ocean.
Yeah, was there a particular reason why they didn't want to send it out
I'm
there?
not the expert on desalinization and
just
those big
curious.
decisions, but
Well, isn't that the water that's going to be coming
Yeah.
back in to be desalinated?
yeah.
So it's just a cycle.
Tom, do
But
you know
hopefully
why?
they're gonna release it from a different intake spot.
Tom, do you know why they don't want to send it out 8 miles?
No, I don't.
No?
Probably money.
Yeah. Yeah,
All
so,
this talk of water
last
is making
thing,
me thirsty.
this is Austin's ASR. How did I get that? Oh, yeah, so that was a picture of what it looks like when they inject it. You get this water bubble. And then there's the buffer zone, that's where the old water and the new water interact. That's where we're scared because it could impact somebody. So in the case of Austin's ASR, City of Smithville is in the same formation, the Carrizo, and they're just south of there. So they're what we call down dip. The water naturally drains that way. So if they were to have a contamination in this buffer zone, it might drift down to Smithville's water supply.
Or into somebody's well that had drilled down into that area?
And there aren't any Carrizo wells in that area, so that's, to their credit, they chose that spot because there aren't any domestic or livestock wells or other city supply wells that could be contaminated. But Smithville is a good distance away. We're talking 30 years down the road, they could ruin Smithville's water supply, not overnight. But, and then the biggest thing, the other thing we do is SAWDF. So only in Bastrop County does the Carrizo-Wilcox be split open by the Colorado River. So remember I talked about those recharge zones were way over here? So these are the recharge zones, this brown and this brown area, and it actually extends underground here under the river, and it comes all the way down this way. It heads across. So those are the
All the
recharge
brown on
zones.
this side as well?
The light brown, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So that's the recharge zone where the rain falls, it percolates in, and then it heads towards the coast. So the river here cuts open that recharge zone. So you don't get the natural filtering, right? You throw out your herbicide, and it filters through that sand, and after it's gone through 100 yards of sand, you don't have that contamination in the aquifer going into somebody's well a mile away. Well, the river changes that. There's no filter. It splits it open, right? And so you don't have that natural filtration. You're already right in that beginning of the aquifer. And so currently, the aquifer is under so much pressure that it's giving water
We're right there.
to the river. Every year, the
You can see the
aquifer
road.
gives about 2 Lake Bastrops to the river. Only here in Bastrop County. Doesn't happen in Fayette County, doesn't happen in Travis County. Only here. And so, as those other wells come online, Lower Colorado River Authority, Recharge, City of Bastrop has their wells up here. As those wells come online, Aqua Water has a big well field down here off of Shiloh and 304. As those wells pump more and more, by the year 2060, the aquifer is not going to give water to the river. The aquifer is going to suck water out of the river. So in the year 2060, what do you want in the river? because you're gonna be drinking it 20 years later. So that's what SAWDF has been working on. We've been scrutinizing and these dots here, these are wastewater outfalls. So the Colony Phase 2, they dump their treated wastewater into the river right above Fisherman's Park.
Oh, yikes.
What?
This was SpaceX
Yeah, SpaceX.
and the Boring Company. This was gonna be the excess ranch. This is a permit, the permit exists, but no one's done the development. So that'll be 1 million gallons a day of wastewater going into the river above Fisherman's Park. They've just upgraded this permit from 50,000 acre-feet, 50,000 gallons a day to 500,000 gallons a day, and they dump it in right next to the Hyatt.
Well, and this one is Meritage
Okay.
at Double Eagle.
Okay, and so
That
it
our
runs
county
through,
commissioner said, no, can't do septic.
it runs through Dry Creek.
You have to have a water treatment plant.
Yeah. So the wastewater outfalls, so there's 2 more that want to come online, dump into Dry Creek, and then the Dry Creek goes to the Colorado. So what's of concern is the contamination level. So what we call the daily load, maximum load that can be accomplished. So here we have to deal with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. So there's a group called Environmental Stewardship that we work with. They work on the river. They do testing. So the river itself, because of these wastewater plants, the river has 10 times the EPA level for forever chemicals. So if you go to Fisherman's Park, that's what you're wading in. It's forever chemicals. Phosphate and nitrate levels are above normal, and so there's algae blooms. And you saw where, the dogs dying from the blue-green algae in Austin. That potentially is going to happen down here. This Camp Swift treatment plant, they're going to go from 300,000 to 2 million gallons a day. They currently irrigate 3 center pivots with that water. They're going to discontinue the center pivots. They're going to put all 2 million gallons a day into Piney Creek. Piney Creek comes in 500 yards above Fisherman's Park. It's right across from Bob Bryant Park, if you ever go there. So that's where all that it's treated wastewater, but it still has phosphates, nitrates, dissolved oxygen, and forever chemicals.
All right, that brings up the question, up in Wichita Falls, I know for sure, and I think there's other places in Texas, they have gone ahead and done extra treatment of sewage water so that they can reuse
They do
it for drinking.
potable reuse.
Okay? I don't know how much extra that costs, but I'm wondering, is that technology close enough where in a decent time frame we could start doing that same technology at some of these places you're worried about?
Correct. That's what SAWDF has been asking for.
Okay.
And so, so there's a court case for this because it's going from 50 to 500, and it's a very short run to the river.
Well, the other ones are
And it's right on top. It's right on top of the. So these 2, I have a different graphic that shows those X'd out. I think. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah.
Okay,
So
but there's still the other one.
took these 2 off, and this one is a future permit. So we're fighting this one in court.
Why aren't you fighting the one up at Meritage and Double Eagle?
Yeah,
Because
find that
it's-
one.
I don't know anything about it till I pulled
do.
this map. Okay.
Because I live in Double Eagle, but
Okay.
not in Meritage.
Okay.
And the county commissioners, when we all went to complain about Meritage, that they wanted to put that in, it was the county commissioner, and a commissioner who
there's
shall be
no-
nameless,
Right.
who's a female,
So
but I'm not naming her,
the difference would be
said,
you
no
have to
septic.
either have everyone on septic or, right.
Everybody's been on septic, but when Meritage came in,
They decided to do a treatment.
oh, she's like, no, septic,
Okay. Okay.
but now they have that.
Okay. that one I didn't know about, if I had known. So what we did do was work with, if y'all have seen when you drive through, this subdivision here is called Silverleaf. So they had a permit for,
Yeah, that's gonna be fairly large.
it's a large deal, a big high-end, really nice. So we asked for a public hearing on that permit, SAWDF did.
That's right after the.
And the developers called and said, who are you and why are you doing this? No one ever contests these things. No one ever asks about them, you know? And so I explained the relationship with the river and the potential contamination. And the developer said, well, the river's our selling point. It's one of the things we point to, you know, the people will be close to it. So he says, we don't want to hurt the river. What can we do? The developer said. And so, well, so then we actually went out and we toured the property when it was still cattle field and where everything would be. And so he upgraded his reuse of treated effluent for all his green space, because he's got a whole bunch of walking and hike and bike trails and ponds. And so they're using 70% of their treated effluent for all of their green space. And then where there would be an outfall, he agreed to put in a constructed wetlands, a grassy marsh, and that will soak up the phosphate and the nitrate before it ever gets into the creek. And it'll soak up some of the forever chemicals too. So then it goes through Dry Creek, and by the time it gets to the Colorado, it won't be an additional load to the river. So they agreed to that. We signed a legal binding. We get to go in every 6 months and see their progress on doing all of this, and we'll be able to monitor them every 6 months in the future. And that's what we've been bringing to developers, is to say, you know, work with us. We're not against your development. We want you to work with us and protect the quality of the river. You're in a unique zone. We already get 5 million gallons a day from Austin of treated wastewater. So most of this water you see, I mean, there isn't water coming over the dam. It's all coming from the 2 wastewater treatment plants that are below the dam. That's how the river stays full here in Bastrop, you know, during those droughts. That's, you know, that and what the aquifer contributes. And so if we can keep the production in the Simsboro at its level or reduce it, you know, in the future, then the river will continue to feed the river, and we won't have that contamination problem reversing. So it's a long battle. So the last thing I want to say is questions, but we need you all. So there's people that work on this. Your county judge appoints 5 members to the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District. 3 of those positions are coming up for renewal this December. Okay, so what we need is somebody that's willing to follow the law, the Texas Water Code, that's willing to learn some of the science of the hydrology and what the structure is about these aquifers, and who's also concerned about keeping water in the county, Lee and Bastrop County, for our economic development, instead of serving the I-30 and I-35 corridor. And those are the kind of people that you could present to the county judge for appointment. And that's a 3-year appointment. And so we need somebody that's gonna do the homework, right? And the law is, you may feel the law is confining, but you can be creative. They denied these permits for an expansion, right? So they didn't deny them to have any groundwater, they just said you can't have more. They did that in Gonzales County with the law. So it's possible, but you have to be looking towards that and finding the scientific data that supports your using the law to deny a permit or to reduce a permit or to phase in a permit, and then to be concerned about everybody's access to groundwater. Those are what we need, people like that. Then to push your representative. Representative Gerdes, for all his faults, was very, he passed at least 5 groundwater bills this session that are going to help us. He sponsored the bill that was after 8 years finally got passed, and we got Senator Colcourse to file it in the Senate. He did the bill on the water loss for 2 sessions and got that passed. So whoever you have as a state representative needs to be, and senator. This was the first year we engaged Senator Schwartner. I didn't know his staff very well. He was animate, especially on that bill to keep Austin water out. He's told me, he's like, Bastrop is my constituents, not Austin. I will do what Bastrop wants. You don't want them here, I will defend that. And he did his best defending that in that debate.
I want to talk a little bit about the climate at the Texas legislature. I was over in Milam County just a few days ago, and at a meeting where the county judge was saying, we've got a real, he was talking about water, and he was saying we got a real uphill battle in water because most of the legislators are suburban and urban that want the water, and they see it as their job is to get the water. And that may mean getting it from us. And he says, so we've got an uphill battle in the legislature. And I guess one of the reasons I see it was miraculous that we got don't use the money for new groundwater. And I thought that was tremendous victory, primarily because of the work you guys did to get Senator Perry on board, and because Cody Harris is from a rural area, and they were the 2 power players. But I will tell you that I saw just the opposite of the good news happen with the Marvin Nichols Reservoir up in Northeast, the plan. It's been on the books for 50 years where they're going to go flood out a whole bunch of people, family farms, been in farm for generations. They're going to flood them out and then seize a whole bunch, even more land than that for quote-unquote mitigation because of the feds. And the 3 state reps, 2 of which were powerful chairs in the Texas House for boroughs, and 1 freshman, they made a concerted effort to try to get Marvin Nichols killed. And they took it to the floor, made an impassioned plea about, please protect these people in the rural areas. You don't have to do this, urban people. And the urban and suburban guys, 2/3 to 1/3, voted them down and refused to kill Marvin Nichols. So it's a hard battle, and I wanted to see from your perspective what made things go as well as they did this time around. What do you think it takes to overcome this rural versus urban battle on the water front?
I don't have an answer to that, Tom. I stayed in my lane, so I didn't have that broad deal. I cultivated relationships in the House Natural Resources Committee. I've always gone and so my philosophy is this. I have a uniform. The Senate, I wear this Guayabera, and in the House, I have a red Guayabera, and it's a little different, and it's more. I wear my farmer boots when I go to the House, and I wear my alligator skin boots when I go to the Senate. And I sit in the front and I smile at all the opening hearings, and I don't have, there's no bills that I'm testifying on, but I'm just present, and I sit up front, and then when the session's over, I go up and shake everyone's hand before they run off. And they don't know who I am, and I don't know, but I know their name because there's a plaque, except for the chairman, you know. But I cultivate that relationship, so then the day when I testify, they assume I'm somebody with some knowledge and I have a dog to hunt because I've been at these meetings regularly. And they recognize me because it's always the same outfit, you know. And that's just my tactic. Then I begin to talk to their staff, and we make that appeal, and we find who the movers and shakers are, And so all I've done, I've never worked the House floor or the Senate floor. All I've ever done is succeed at the committee level. And I leave it up to our senator and our representative to do the work on the floor. Yes, sir.
Most of the things that I've seen are more or less current.
All I saw was on this.
What I want to know, in Bastrop County, by the year 2030, we're supposed to be somewhere between 200 and 250,000 people. By the year 2100, we're supposed to be close to 1 million people in our county. Is there anybody that has a plan or is even looking or talking about a plan of how to handle that with water?
So the only thing that addresses that is what's called the state water plan. And it's done in regions. And we're in Region K, which is the Colorado River. And so it starts in Burnett and it goes all the way to Matagorda, and it's all the counties that are along the river. And it's just Bastrop and Fayette and Travis, and then it builds out up north in the watershed, and then it just stays to the river, Columbus and
All the way down.
Colorado, and then Will Parker, Matagorda, all those counties. So, and I participate in those regional water plan studies. So one way they're going to address that is Travis is going to take more water from Bastrop. The LCRA is going to build a reservoir. Talk about Marvin Nichols. LCRA plans to build an off-channel reservoir right here between Smithville and Bastrop off the river and generate, it's like a 50,000 acre foot. So it'd be 5 times the size of Lake Bastrop. They're going to build that reservoir down there, and that's to generate firm water, they call it, to ship back to Travis County. That's in their current regional water plan.
Yeah, but
And they're going to do this.
That doesn't
They're
help
going to
us
do the
then.
same thing in Fayette County, and they're going to do the same thing in Columbus County, and all that is to ship water back to Travis.
No, it doesn't help us.
The
I
only
don't
thing
think
they address for Bastrop County in the state water plan is to suck more water out of the Simsboro to meet their population needs. That's the only thing I've seen in there, and that per capita use has to go down. And any water loss, municipal water loss, the system itself losing water into the ground has to be reduced. So those are the 2 goals. So they're going to be by conserving water and by sucking more water out of the ground. That's how they plan to meet the future needs in Bastrop. Because they figure irrigation, as you build out these
Sounds like the
neighborhoods.
future needs of Boston, not so much Bastrop.
Right.
As their deal is, as they build out more homes, there won't be as much irrigation water. Because right now, there's a considerable amount of water that's used for center pivots and stuff. So that water will be turned into water for homes. So you'll trade agriculture. There's some water for mining, and that's the old Alcoa stuff that comes down next to Elgin. They'll convert that water to municipal water. That's how they plan in that regional plan. It's it's 50 years out trying to be a crystal ball. And they ask, like City of Elgin, where are you going to get your water? You're going to have 60,000 more people. And City of Elgin is like, oh, well, we'll just sink another well over here.
Sounds like we're definitely gonna get the shaft.
Yeah, it's the state, so that's another where,
So to speak.
another place where you can begin. So the state water plan it's a 5-year process, and then it starts again. And you can participate in that, and you could become a voting member. You could ask to represent, whether it's industry, the public, recreational use, county.
Who's in charge of the plan?
Lower Colorado River Authority. Lines, you can imagine how that works. But it's actually under the Texas Water Development Board. So if you look it up on the internet, all you do is look for Region K, Regional Water Planning Group. And there's a meeting coming up next week, or no, June 2nd is the next meeting.
Well, that's already passed.
I'm sorry, July 2nd.
July
Thank
2nd.
you. Yeah. But they're at the point where they have the draft plan, and now it's just all nitpicking on that. Because the region plans are done, and this year, and then next year they amalgamate all of them into a state water plan. And the key to this is funding. For Water Development Board to give you money, your project has to be in one of those regional water plans. So everybody and their brother puts their pie in the sky project in there so that if they ever get their stuff together, all their permits and their right-of-ways, they can beg money from the Water Development Board because it's in the plan.
Right.
And what Chairman Perry has always said, he says every session, he's like, I'm going to scrutinize that plan, and if you're just blowing smoke, I'm going to remove it from the plan. He said, I only want realistic expectations. Because he said, otherwise we're just kicking the can down the road. We're not solving our problems of where we're really going to get water 50 years from now. So he's demanding, and he tried to kick Marvin Nichols out based on that. He's like, they've been trying to permit this for 40 years.
It's over 50.
Yeah, he's like, let's just call it quits. That's a lot of wasted money. So. Regional water plan, the groundwater conservation district. If you're an Aqua customer, go to the Aqua board meetings and find out what they're doing. Aqua is doing some really innovative, they got a campaign to conserve water. So they put in a new storage tank over here right off of 71 next to the state park. They're going to look at, so here's a creative deal.
And Monica, you put those Aqua meetings on our calendar, right?
Yeah.
I was looking for the next one, I couldn't find it yet.
Yeah.
So when I do, I was gonna.
But they've got some good engineers, a really bright new general manager. They're forward thinking, and she is totally dependent on the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer. Aqua water is, and they know that, and so they are protective of the groundwater. They ship a little water to Caldwell County, but it's very minor. Most of their business is Lee County, from Blue over to all of Bastrop. They had sent a little water to Creedmoor, there south of the airport, but most of their water stays in Bastrop. And they understand they're totally dependent on the Carrizo, and if someone messes that up, they're gonna be toast. And they don't wanna have to pay to deepen their wells, so they're against all these other people sucking it and sending it away. They've been a good.
It's like they better get part of the plan, because they're sucking all their water.
You mentioned about how San Antonio has a desal plant, and they use groundwater that they have right there.
Yes, sir.
To your knowledge, does Bastrop County or any of the surrounding counties that we're talking about, do we have brackish groundwater anywhere around here?
Yes, we do.
What are they deeper than all the ones you were talking about, or where are they? How deep are they?
Oh, yeah, they're the deep end of the Simsboro and the deep end of the Carrizo. The deeper you go, the more saline it gets, the more salty the water gets. And so there's some, and that's also in the Aqua water plan. It's a modest, brackish desal, aquifer storage, and then maximizing their wells. Anyway, this will go on for days, folks. I appreciate your interest.
Thank you.
Look at where you can become involved.
Thank you, Andy, so much.
Sorry for going so long.